Good afternoon, and welcome to episode 18 of the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review. I'm your boy, Dr. Krish Tewari, the Master Taster here at Rolling Thunder Scotch. And look what we have here on my cask today. We have the Glenmorangie 18 years of age, extremely rare. For our extra content this afternoon, I've got Dr. Devansu Tewari, who will be joining us shortly. But before I proceed with that part of this episode, I'd like to remind you to smash that like, ring the notification bell on your way out, and leave us a comment. I'd like to know who your top 5 Lakers are after this episode. When we reach 50,000 subscribers, we're going to be doing a giveaway. I've got batch number 1 from distillery number 3 of the Lost Spirits Distillery, a local LA distillery. This is the Abomination Heavily Peated Malt. And when we hit 50,000 subscribers, we're also giving away this Batman statue designed based on the artwork of Brian Boland, who did the art for the Alan Moore graphic novel, The Killing Joke. The head sculpt and the portrait are fantastic, and you can see he's carrying the Joker card. So this will be part of our giveaway when we get 50,000 subscribers. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to our special guest who's joining me today, Dr. Devansu Tewari. All right, welcome back to episode 18. Joining me on the other side of the cask is Dr. Tewari, Dr. Devansu Tewari. He's a GYN oncologist at Kaiser. He's the head of GYN oncology in Southern California Kaiser Permanente. He's one of these people that's this quadruple threat. Not only is he a leader, but he's also the PI of a PCORI grant, which is a federally funded grant to replace Pap smears with high-risk HPV DNA testing. He's also a phenomenal teacher. He trains our UC Irvine residents in their 3rd and 4th years in gynecologic cancer surgery. And he is UCI born and bred. My parents were UC Irvine professors. He did his undergrad at UC Irvine, medical school at UC Irvine, residency at UC Irvine. He was on faculty in the general OBGYN department for a year at UC Irvine, did his fellowship at UC Irvine, and then when he finished his fellowship in 2006, he became a volunteer clinical faculty member. And he is one of the founders of the Krishna and Sujata Tewari Memorial Scholarship that's in our parents' names to award a promising graduate student and medical student with a scholarship every single year. So Dr. Tewari is very busy. One of the things, two of his passions, of course, are the Lakers and Springsteen. We definitely will want him back on our channel sometime to talk about Springsteen, but we don't want to suffer from overexposure, so it'll be some time. Today we wanted to focus on the Lakers. As you know, the tragedy when Kobe Bryant and his daughter and 7 other people passed away in the helicopter crash of January 26th was too fresh several months ago, and so we thought we'd wait a while before featuring the Lakers on the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review. And with me today is Dr. Tewari to count down the top 5 Lakers. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so
looking forward to this.
Yeah, before we start, I was just interested. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We may be coming out of it. How has it been at Kaiser? I think you guys have an infrastructure where you were probably well prepared to take care of this stuff and with Zoom meetings or what have you. But can you share with us what it's been like practicing medicine and doing surgery in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I don't think it's any different than what you guys have been going through, except that, we are a larger scale organization, but I think the biggest thing for us was, the fear that everybody didn't have the standard procedures or operating procedures around how to take care of these patients. So, we've been fortunate, I think, by where we're located in Orange County, where the numbers have been relatively stable. But, whereas you look at other areas that may not have been able to get testing in as quickly, our scalability was able to bring in testing much earlier, I think, than other systems. And it was actually very helpful in us being able to create the processes around those patients who either were at risk or actually had the virus. But the numbers have been stable, fortunately, for Southern California. Los Angeles has been, still a concern, but overall, we couldn't be happier by the camaraderie. I think that you probably experienced it at Irvine and other places, that I thought 2 things would never happen in medicine, that healthcare providers would be so well appreciated and accepted by the community, and secondly, that doctors and nurses and everybody could work together for a common mission so effectively, and that part's been very exciting, but I'm sure it's the same where you're at as well.
Yeah, no question. I think that's a really interesting point. Our parents are from India, and in India, the reception and the treatment of the physicians has been the opposite. Many of the people that were taking care of the COVID-19 patients in India were shunned, the doctors and the healthcare personnel, and some of them were evicted from their homes. So you bring up a very good point. I'm very thankful that we did experience that camaraderie here, because we didn't. Those are not the reports coming out of India. All right. Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of put this in context with the pandemic we're in. Let's talk about the Lakers.
Absolutely.
You are a super fan, I would say. You've been, I think our father got you really excited about sports. His era was Wilt Chamberlain. Chamberlain, as you know, was a Laker from 69 to 71 or 68 to 71. He was known as Goliath, more than 7 foot tall. He was also called the Big Dipper. Wilt Chamberlain was my dad's era, but his greatness was even before he was a Laker, right? Mm-hmm. He was in the Harlem Globetrotters because the NBA had never recruited someone without a bachelor's degree. And Wilt Chamberlain never finished college, and Chamberlain went to the Harlem Globetrotters, and with his big magnetic personality, he became a top draw. With the Warriors, I think that's who he was with. In Philly. Yeah. In 62, was it? I think he scored a 100-point game, and that's never been beaten by a single player. And if you look at the statistics on that game, I think the final score was like 172 to 142. Unbelievable. When I think of Wilt, I have to be sensitive to our younger viewers that that subscribe to the channel. And just as an aside, I think at the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review, we want to encourage drinking responsibly, and we do not encourage underage drinking, but I get it with the extra content that we provide. There are some people under 18 that subscribe to the channel, so we have to tone things down. So the thing that I love about Wilt Chamberlain, 2 things that come to mind. He almost fought Cassius Clay twice, and I think in the 60s and in the 70s. Muhammad Ali either backed down or something, or maybe Wilt backed down. But also, Wilt is supposed to have hugged over 20,000 women. You heard about that?
Yes, we have.
Yeah. Tell me, what do you make of that?
Well, there's a claim statistically. It'd be hard to match that, but it was one of his major statements that he will be remembered for many years. That after his playing career, that particular statistic that was reminded people of how he was, what he'd done, and has lived on as a not an urban legend, I'd say, but more of a happy reflection on the bigger than life type of person was. I mean, going back to Chamberlain, I mean, you have to realize basketball in the 60s was dominated by the Celtics, and Wilt, like you mentioned, was in the Harlem Globetrotters, and he scored 100 points. He averaged 50 points a game, which will never ever be matched. And people forget, he even led the league one year in assists as a big man, and he was a gentle giant full of life, and gets lost a lot of times in the discussions about the greatest players, because at the time nobody could ever score like him. In fact, I mean, obviously way past our time, but we'd hear about it and read about it. But Wilt, changed the whole game. He actually had to extend the court size because of him. They put rules just specifically to actually contain him, and he was just a monster. And he obviously would, at the time, go down as the greatest scorer in league history. That would eventually be eclipsed by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, or Cinder before he converted his name. But just an amazing story. But you bring it up that he was with Philadelphia, and for many years, the one guy that he just couldn't get past was Bill Russell. And
from the Celtics.
From the Celtics.
His
nemesis, and not nearly the scorer or the player, but for some reason just could not get past him in those championships or in those in that era. So our father was a big Celtic fan, and so naturally it was a fun internal war of sports because we fell on the side of the West and the Lakers, and he was a big Celtic fan. But you always talk about Russell and Chamberlain. At that time in sports, you couldn't think of two bigger Goliaths going up against each other.
Fantastic, yeah. And I just love the idea. So Wilt had a day planner, and he put a check mark in every time he hugged a girl. And after a 10-day period, there were 23 checks, which is about 2.3 hugs per day. And so he wanted to be conservative. So he divided it in half and then multiplied that by the number of days he'd been alive at that point. He was 55 years old, minus 14 years of age. And that's where the 20,000 came from. So I just love that. Bigger than life, great player.
Absolutely. But in terms of the Lakers now, he never won a championship until he came to the Lakers. And it was in the early 70s, and to that point, he brought in with Jerry West, and he basically, that year when they won, the Lakers finally themselves got over the top, against the Celtics as well. That year, they set the NBA record, for the most wins in the season. Or sorry, at the time most wins, but at the time the longest winning streak that is held up today of 33 wins, and it was a very legendary team. And so to combine that, when he came to the Lakers, he had to give up a lot of his scoring, and he actually had to become a different player because now he was leading, a group of people, and he was not getting that championship, but he got that one championship in that year. That is still one of the most legendary years of all time.
Fantastic. So you brought up Kareem. You said, so again, just for our younger viewers, Wilt still has the record of the most points scored in a game, but most points scored overall, absolutely. Kareem beat that record. Now, Kareem is noted for his longevity. He played, I think, with the Lakers from 75 to maybe 89. He was unbelievable. At that time, the basketball commission, I forget what they're called, NCAA?
NBA.
Okay, they came down on this type of shot that was a little controversial. So Chamberlain developed the sky hook. And the sky hook was amazing because it was very difficult to block because you release the ball at the top of the arc. We're talking about Kareem now.
He's a Chamberlain. Kareem developed this guy.
Yeah, Kareem developed the sky hook. I apologize. So Kareem developed the sky hook in response to the NBA commission outlawing a certain move, a certain shot. And the sky hook was difficult to block because you released the ball at the top of the arc. But Kareem, his longevity, he surpassed Chamberlain in most points scored. Tell me what your thoughts are on Kareem.
So, if you're a basketball fan, I think the problem with today when we talk about the Mount Rushmore of players, we leave Kareem out. I mean, there is actually an argument. Everyone talks about Jordan being the GOAT and the greatest of all time. And we can reserve that for episode 200. But the thing about Kareem, he won 6 championships. He won 5 with the Lakers, and everyone forgets he won 1 with Milwaukee, the first team.
That's right.
He went to. He won 3 college world championships, or national.
With the Bruins.
With the Bruins under John Wooden. During that time, he was Lou Alcindor. The guy had multiple MVPs, and to this day, nobody has replicated that sky hook. And he was a dominant player, a smart player, and he won championships in both leagues, or both the East and the West. And he gets forgotten in the whole conversation because, without him, there's no, 5 championships in the 80s with the Lakers and the greatest scorer of all time. But for him to also play at that level for as long as he did, we forget him. He's, he is, what also is forgotten, he is an incredible writer. He's a very intelligent and artistic person. He participated in a lot of the racial civil rights protests of the 70s. He encountered a lot of it himself. And today he's an incredible author. He's actually publishing multiple books, but the guy is an absolute amazing figure in both our society in the past and obviously in sports, and actually what he's been doing for many years. I think he doesn't get the credit because he's very introverted and he never was a very public, warm person that, you know, fans gravitated to like many of the other players, but clearly forgotten and is really up there in Mount Rushmore and arguably made to be considered the greatest.
Wonderful, and you know, and that's why we have Dr. Devansu Tewari on the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review, because he's putting things in perspective. I mean, Kareem didn't have that big personality that Wilt Chamberlain had. He wasn't Magic Johnson, but you know, working quietly in his own space, he was probably one of the greatest. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that he's an author, because you know, I like these extra tidbits about them. You know, Wilt Chamberlain, he went up against Cassius Clay possibly, you know, in the 60s and 1971, but you know, with Kareem, you know, he also trained with Bruce Lee, martial artist.
Absolutely.
And that is a big deal. And I like that, you know. So Kareem, you know, he got his bachelor's at UCLA and then got drafted into the NBA from there. Different route than Wilt Chamberlain took, but actually Wilt made more money with the Harlem Globetrotters than he would have if he'd gone straight to the NBA. So counting down, Chamberlain 5, Kareem 4, we're now at the Shaq. Shaquille O'Neal, probably the most dominant player ever in the NBA, the most overanalyzed player, the most overly criticized player ever. And what's going on with the Shaq?
I mean, gosh, I mean, here's a guy that he won 4 championships, 3 with the Lakers and 1 when he went to Miami. And there's never a physical specimen like him that can move like that. And you bring it up great, the controversy, because the thing about Shaq is larger than life, amazing personality, great businessman. He actually was, you know, I don't know if he actually got his credits to become a police officer, but that's what he was working on.
He is in law enforcement, you're right.
Okay, so he did finish it, obviously an actor,
That's right.
intelligent. But the thing about Shaq is we all don't know what he could have been. I mean, there's still that part. And this was a source of a lot of conflict with him and Kobe about how he didn't really work that hard until the playoffs came. And so no one really knew what he was capable of. And what he was already capable, what he already accomplished was unbelievable. But this guy, I mean, the way he can move, the way with his footwork and his size, I mean, there's no one like that. And that's somebody, you know, and he started having injuries later in his career, but to have gone so many years without an injury with how he moved and that size of that frame is a beast and unbelievable. But again, one of those guys that personalities was bigger than life, and you see him still today. I mean, he's acting, he's in movies, he's obviously a big announcer, and he's a fun character, and people gravitated to him. So it was that superstar, and was made for Hollywood, and this was an ideal, perfect Laker.
Well, I think, you know, again, you're putting things in such great perspective, because you can almost see in the chronology how Kareem could have been overshadowed by Wilt on one end, and then Shaq and Magic Johnson, and then ultimately Kobe on the other end. So, you know, Shaq actually got a PhD. He has a PhD in education. It's not an honorary degree. He's got a real degree. And for me, you know, Rolling Thunder, Bob Dylan, Shaq's a musician. He's a great rapper. One of my favorite songs of Shaq's is Men of Steel, where he raps with Cube and Be Real.
Great rapper, great.
Be Real from Cypress Hill.
Yeah.
Be Real from Cypress Hill and Ice Cube. So that's fantastic. You know, and of our top 5 Lakers, and we'll give them to you now. You may have figured them out. Chamberlain, Kareem, Shaq, Magic Johnson, Kobe. Shaq's the only one to have played with Kobe. He's the only one of these 5 to have played with Kobe for a couple years. There was a feud going on. Can you tell us a little bit about the Shaq-Kobe feud?
But that's what made it so perfect, because you can't have 2 alpha males on a team, and you're going to get conflict, and that conflict of those 2 wanting to be the best and dominate each other is what fueled that whole team. And you know, you could look back at, and they did look back at it, you know, recently until the tragedy. They made up and they talk about those years that it couldn't have been any other way. You can't, the fact that it actually lasted as long as it did, they went to 4 finals, they won 3 in a row, they lost 1, but the team was kind of on the decline already, and to have lasted that long was actually a testament to how much they wanted to win. But the conflict was there, and it was made for some great storylines, and it filled that locker room, and it divided the fan base in a way, because you're either a Shaq or you're a Kobe fan, but you know, it all came together and somehow was able to make it work, and you know, that's the testament to those. And what was, I think, the most interesting thing about that dynamic, that they would probably say it today, but that when they left each other, when the team was broken up, and Shaq would go on to Miami and win a championship there with Dwayne Wade, and then Kobe would, of course, get another 2 with Paul Gasol, that they still drove each other nuts to try to compete with each other. So and they had to win one without the other. So that was their goal, and that drove it. And Shaq got that first, and I know that drove Kobe's deal, because when he won the second one without Shaq, and he had one more than Shaq, he said, I have one more than Shaq. And then people got on him for that. And so, I mean, that was years later. So yeah, but I think that's what fueled those two.
Fantastic. Let's move down to Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, Irvin Magic Johnson, his first name's Irvin. So this guy came and took a great franchise and made it glorious. There was nothing this guy couldn't do. And he achieved everything that any player would ever want to do, and he did it all while he was Laker. Right? He had 2 stints, retired in, 92, 93, and then came back 95, 96. But he was probably most known for his brilliant passing skills. You know, when people thought he was going to shoot, he'd pass. When people thought he was going to pass, he'd shoot. His coach would say, I thought he was going to shoot, and then next thing I know, one of our other players was making a basket. So tell me about Magic Johnson.
Well,
I mean, this is now your era.
So,
you know, just as an aside, in the 80s, I was in college, my brother was still in high school, and I remember driving in to play basketball. He was playing basketball as a high school student, and this is the era of Kareem. But get to the 90s, that's when his full-on obsession with the Lakers blossomed. Late 80s,
right.
90s.
Okay, so, you know, we're going to have a big debate for another episode. Magic Johnson is the greatest basketball player of all time. No hands down. And I know that's a big thing to say. But this guy, so just take a career of this guy. This guy, the NBA was floundering in the 70s. It was really, you know, they even thought about breaking it up. These games were delayed. These games weren't even televised, the championship games, till, you know, hours or if not days later. And so here you have that is 2 players come along. Larry Bird goes to Indiana, and Magic Johnson at Michigan. And they compete in the national championship for college basketball. Obviously Magic wins. Rookie year, he comes into the Lakers. He's got Kareem. The Lakers haven't won a championship since Wilt and Jerry West. And as a rookie, he takes them to the finals. And granted, they had Kareem, but Kareem used to have major issues with migraines and other issues.
That's right.
And they're playing the Philadelphia 76ers. And many people say it's the greatest game of all time still, that, you know, Magic Johnson is a rookie. He's only played, you know, in NCAA 1 year. So he was really a very young 19-year-old, comes in, and everybody knows about it. Says Game 6, they were convinced Lakers were going to lose it. They were on their way back home with, you know, when Kareem wasn't going to play. And Magic started as center. Scored unbelievable. I forgot his stats to this day. I think it was 40 points or something, but it was still considered the greatest game by many of all time. Who wins that championship? And what no one recognizes about Magic, he wins 5 championships in the 80s. Okay. He beat and took down and lost to other NBA championships. Jordan never had to do that. Kobe only had to do it once. You know, the years Jordan never faced a defending champion. Well, Magic had to go through Philadelphia. He beat them. He lost to them. He beat Detroit. He lost to Detroit. He beat Boston. He lost to Boston. He took them year after year. And there's just certain people that know how to build teams. And he permeated all of us. He could play any position he wanted, but he was all about the team. He was a thread that connected everything. And the closest person to doing that today is probably LeBron, because LeBron can make a team run. But people forget it. He went, I got to look at the numbers, 8 out of 10 years he got him to the finals. But larger than life personality, people gravitated him. He became a successful businessman. He epitomized the 80s. But most importantly, if you guys did ever read a book, is there's a book that him and Larry Bird wrote called When the Game Was Ours. And they made it actually into a Broadway play. So it's unbelievable what drove these 2 guys. But if you look at what Magic did, no other player accomplished it. The Celtics kept winning and winning, they just wouldn't lose. but nobody had to go through those championships. And even when Kareem retired, what people forget, and the legacy of Magic, and you got to realize is, Magic took the Lakers to the finals without Kareem. He lost to Chicago, and that was Jordan's first championship. And the following year, they put together a team that many people thought Magic was going to win it without, but then he got diagnosed with HIV. And I think that's the legacy, and you'll always remember him sitting there at the city. This is a death sentence. We all thought we're going to watch a living person, a hero, die in front of our eyes, and he's smiling and he's reassuring everyone on camera, and he's alive today. So I mean, he's the work he's done in the community, with the work he's done as a businessman, and what he's done for sports in general, and many other issues he's worked on is unbelievable. And so that's my personal feeling. And so that's when I think of Magic, I think of the greatest player of all time.
So he's the greatest player of all time,
to me, because to me nobody's had it. It's not, even though Michael won 6 championships, he didn't have to go through anybody. He didn't face a dynasty. And the Celtics of the 80s were considered part of a dynasty. The Philadelphia 76ers were. When Magic beat Detroit the following year, Detroit beat them for 2 years in a row to get. So these are the guys he faced, and I think, and his career was cut short because of his HIV situation. But and he brought people together. Obviously him and Larry Bird saved the NBA and brought it, and they put it there for Michael to take off with, and everyone else that came after. But there's no NBA today, and there's no Michael who wasn't for Magic, and I think from just a difference perspective, just besides basketball, Magic captured what the 80s were in Los Angeles, and I think this young kid leading him to a championship, coming out here with a large smile on his face, he was Hollywood. I mean, and that really started this, and. The Lakers hadn't gone over the hump. They were a dominant team. They had a history. They weren't the Celtics. Magic reset the whole NBA, reset the whole franchise, reset the whole storyline that has gone through to this day in 2020.
Wow.
And let's not forget, he brought LeBron to the Lakers this past
He did that.
4 years.
And we should also shout out, he was on part of the dream team that won the Olympic gold medal in '92 in Barcelona. So businessman. I think he owned the Dodgers for some time.
Yeah, he's part owner there.
Yep.
What he touches is gold. He was part of the team that brought the Dodgers back, because his personality is infectious. There's a lot of us know many of these people in our lives. We are at UCI. Think of a particular individual this time, Dr. Desai, whose culture and personality infected the whole program at UCI and GYN oncology and nationally, and it's a legacy, and that's what Magic is. It's just certain people, that leave behind a culture because of that individual. Jordan didn't leave that behind in Chicago. Bird didn't leave that behind in Boston. We go down the list. They didn't leave it behind.
But Magic did.
Left it behind, and he served it up for everything else.
It's almost as if they captured lightning in a bottle.
Absolutely.
Right.
Great way to say it.
So before we talk about Kobe, I just want to shout out to my nephew Sanjay, Devansu's son. He's a phenomenal player. I mean, everyone knows that. And so Kobe's going to be difficult for Debu to talk about, because the tragedy of Kobe and Gianna and the other people on the helicopter really hit home. They lived near them. Sanjay knows Kobe, and
all the kids in the community.
Yeah, all the kids know him. And I think I know that was devastating, and I appreciate you coming on the channel today to talk about Kobe. But tell me what you think. I mean, for most of us, he's the first person drafted to the NBA right out of high school, right?
Not the first, but at that time, started a trend.
Okay, yeah, started the trend. And,
Kevin Garnett had the year before done so, and then many years before that, Moses Malone and Dawkins. But it was very uncommon. But now it's obviously
it's more common. 3 consecutive championships for his first 3 seasons. 2 more championships in 2009, 2010. Also got an Olympic gold medal, I think in London, and Olympics in London.
Barcelona.
Beijing. Barcelona was magic. So tell us about Kobe.
Well, so this is all about the history of the Lakers, and You know, I think I've texted you about this. Kobe's the one, you know, as much as like Magic grew up also in LA and really stuck the brand. Magic was like an adult when he came in. You know, there's a great story about Magic when he was in Michigan in the high school, the principal, when they were integrating the high school, the principal actually went to Magic and said they're bringing Caucasian kids in, and actually went to Magic and said, can you protect them and integrate them? And so Magic was already kind of an adult already. Kobe's a kid. And I think the beauty of Kobe is that you saw him come here as a kid. And he, you know, I don't attest in sports that he put a jersey on and it doesn't matter, he just put a jersey on from a city and he played a sport. It's kind of silly that we root for teams. Teams capture the culture of the community. And with Kobe, Kobe was a kid when he came to California. You know, he had a very dysfunctional reported relationship with his parents, and so he kind of grew up before our eyes. But you just didn't know what you're going to get with Kobe. And when it's called rage, it was a show. And the drive of this guy, and you know, it's absolutely unbelievable. He was 18 when he came, and you know, he was obviously with Shaq, and those 3 years, you know, that he won those 3 championships. But it was like a kid that was trying to break free. Even that's what was a conflict with Shaq. He knew what he wanted. He spoke multiple languages. He was smart as heck. He was so.
He spoke Chinese or Mandarin, right?
Mandarin, Italian, Spanish as well. But he was just off the charts. But as a basketball player, you know, I go back to this. I mean, it's hard to imagine how you do basketball like rankings, you know. But Magic, you know, as much as I think he's the best, you know, he had a body. You know, Kareem had a body, Wilt had a body, LeBron, you know.
Shaq had a body.
Yeah. Kobe's just average. His body is like him and Jordan. You talk about those two being some of the two of the greatest. What they had to do with their body frame that was very common and go up against and dominate. And they had to have a drive. And to see Kobe, and you know, I mean, that guy. I still think there's no one who could withstand pain more than him. I mean, that is a thing that if you watch what he would play with broken fingers. I mean, you know, my image of Kobe are 4 really, or you know, probably more than that. But the one, you know, I remember is when he was a rookie and they were in the playoffs. He airballed 3 straight 3-point shots, but he wasn't afraid to take them. And he came back the next year, and he's starting to grow, and he just knew something special was happening to him. I'll never forget, you know, when our mother died, you probably don't know this story, but the year was 2000, and my father donated money to the school she was teaching at, and they named the library after her. We went to an event that morning, and that was Game 7 of the Portland Trailblazers against the Lakers that afternoon, and I told Nita, my wife, I said, we got to go, and that was a road that they went to the first championship on. And Kobe made a move that lives in infamy, where he did his alley-oop to Shaq after they were down by over 10 in the 4th, that sealed the deal. And it was the last thing you expected Kobe to do. And then the other time, you know, he scored 81 points, the closest to Wilt's 100 point. I mean, he just didn't know what he could see. And then the other time, he tears his Achilles on the court with nobody helping him. He walks to that free throw line to hit those 2 free throws and walks off that court. I mean, an Achilles, I mean, that's just absolutely ridiculous, and still could go there. Everyone saw it on national TV, saw he tore, knew it was torn. He still went and he shot those 2 free throws and walked off the court. You know, the guy, and then, you know, when he retired, his skills were definitely gone. I mean, not gone, but he wasn't the player he was. And, you know, his last game, he scored 60, you know, and in front of everyone, it was showtime. And it was just, you didn't know there's a fight going to break out, the intensity of him. You know, he was a very difficult person to work with. You hear it from a basketball standpoint, but boy, as I just watching him, there's something to learn from that guy. I mean, working on his trade, how hard he did his job, and then you know, you saw him grow up. You saw him go through some issues with his family when he was younger. There's there were some things that trying to mature. He didn't have that maturity, but you saw him mature. This grow up to be this great father, this great person within the community. He was doing something so special for women's sports the last few years. He got away from the game. I mean, I think women's basketball is just about to take off. because it was he who was pouring his energy into that sport, tending it. His daughter had formed his own girls basketball team that was gaining prominence, and obviously won an Oscar. You know, he had a man of
Dear Basketball,
Dear
short animated feature. Yeah.
yeah. So the guy is just absolutely unbelievable, and you know he's the tragedy. It's like we got Magic. You know, we thought we were going to lose Magic in '91, and who would have thought we would have had Magic for the next 30 years.
30 years.
And we got to see that. And Kobe was just getting started. And for our kids, especially in this community, it was Kobe was their first hero. And the day he passed was, most of the kids in this community, obviously as a national tragedy, everyone felt the same. But here it was final exams, for the first semester was ending.
And this is pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, and so I remember, there was visuals going on, and the kids that week they had to go to finals, and most of the kids in this community had either run into him or seen him, or maybe knew his daughters, including there was only 1 degree of separation for people on that helicopter in this community, but to those kids, and to all of us, we lost something more than just him, but what we lost was a hero, but also what was coming. To have that cut short, and the way he was as a player that's how it was. He turned on the game to not know what was going to happen next. And so Magic actually called Kobe the greatest Laker of all time, and that's not a bad statement. I think I obviously have a preference or bias because of what I talked about Magic, but to watch Kobe actually grow up and to watch him go through his trials and tribulations, both personally and professionally, and then reach that level of maturity is really the story of any individual, and it's just a beautiful story that ended so tragically.
Thank you for sharing that. Really must have still a lasting impact on you.
I'll just say one last thing.
Yeah.
I will never forget the vigil that was there that night. They held it in the evening, and the mayor was up there, and I couldn't believe how many kids came. These were young kids, and it's just, and older kids, obviously, and adults. But I just, that's the impact. You knew what you were getting. There was something special about him. It wasn't just the love of his game. It was he'd already been retired, a few years. But the fact that there was something building with him. There was something related to community, and there was that stage that you never thought he would grow into, and then he grew into that because he was so intense on the court, but then he was becoming this incredible mentor, leader, a citizen that people were seeing and enjoying. It was just, it was felt at all ages.
Yeah. So at Rolling Thunder, we've named our channel in tribute to Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Review, and Knockin' on Heaven's Door. Bob Dylan's song that was recorded in '73 or appeared on his '73 album, Pete Garrett and Billy the Kid. Guns N' Roses, an LA band, they did a great cover version of it in their 1991 Use Your Illusions 2 album. 4 or 5 days after Kobe passed away, Guns N' Roses was playing at the Super Bowl Fest, and Axl dedicated Knocking on Heaven's Door to Kobe, Gianna, and all the people that passed away in the helicopter crash. A couple months later at the Staples Center, Paul Stanley from Kiss was wearing a number 24 jersey in tribute and honor to Kobe, and dedicated the entire concert to Kobe. Kind of brings us full circle. My father took me to my very first concert in the 70s, and it was Kiss. And then 43 years later, a year ago, I took my son, Jeremy, to see Kiss. Same guys. All right, well, that wraps up the additional content for the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review, episode 18. Stay tuned, we're going to be breaking open this bad boy, the Glenmorangie Extremely Rare 18 Years of Age. Thank you. Welcome back to episode 18 of the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review. I'm here with my brother, our featured guest, Dr. Tewari, who gave us a very, very scholarly and emotional rundown of the 5 greatest Lakers of all time. Chamberlain, Kareem, the Shaq, Magic Johnson, and Kobe. He prefers, he considers Magic Johnson the best Laker, and that's fine. We're going to go head to head about this another time, but we're not. We don't want him to suffer from overexposure. I do want to say this. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash that like, and hit the notification bell on your way out. Leave us a comment. I'd like to know who your top 5 Lakers are. We may have got it wrong, so leave some comments down below. We've got the Glenmorangie, 18 years of age. This is extremely rare. My brother's here, so I thought I'd break this bad boy open. Glenmorangie was founded by Mr. Matheson in 1843 in the Highlands of Scotland. Those of you who love the movie Braveheart, Rob Roy, or The Highlander, which featured Christophe Lambert, French actor, and Sean Connery, will know how beautiful the Highlands are. And my favorite scotches come from the Highlands, and the Glenmorangie is my favorite scotch. It's a great introductory scotch for those of you thinking about getting interested in scotch. I know many of the subscribers to this channel are new to the water of life, as the Scots call it. So Glenmorangie is distilled in the tallest stills in Scotland, the tallest stills, and the process is amazing. For the 18 years of age, it's matured in oak barrels, American oak barrels, for 15 years. At year 15, 30% of the whiskey is taken out and placed in Spanish Oloroso barrels. And both the 70% left behind in the American oak and the 30% that's been transferred to the Spanish Oloroso age for another 3 years. And then they're blended together to give us the 18 years of age. So I'm really excited to break this open and taste it. Some of the tasting notes, I have a little cheat sheet. So color, it's Baltic amber, very clearly Baltic amber. The nose apparently is breamed honey butter, pink grapefruit, blackberry preserves, and allspice. So let's see if we notice any of that. I'm going to try to get this open here. In the meantime, I do want to tell you that Glenmorangie is interesting because they have these master craftsmen that they employ known as the Men of Tain. The Men of Tain, and they are entrusted with the secrets of the distillery. And they don't reveal any of their secrets, even though I just told you that 30% of it goes to those Spanish barrels. So that's okay. But the Men of Tain have this, they're entrusted with the secrets of the scotch. And I think this is going to be exciting. Yeah. Today we have with us co-founder Chad Perry. He's over to my right. Dr. Juliette Wolford, who's finishing her fellowship in GYN oncology. Actually, we had the last epic case yesterday. She's on the video camera. And then Murali Hundi Kamath, fellow UCLA Bruin undergrad, went to UC Irvine for medical school, and then has been with Kaiser for residency in OBGYN, and as a clinician, owns a wonderful Thai restaurant in Yorba Linda, Supatra. So that's why we've got 5 glasses. Did you want to give me yours?
Absolutely.
Oh, I see we have a Batman statue here. That's the Batman by Bob Kane, the first appearance of Batman in 1937. During the pandemic, we all have our vices, and I've started getting into statue collecting. So I've got now 11 Batman statues. I got one more on the way and 2 giant ones, not counting this one that we're giving away in when we get 50,000 subscribers. There you go.
Thank you.
Rolling.
Thank you.
Dr. Wolford, the newly graduated GYN oncologist. Let me hand this to you. Great. Chad Perry, her better half, and co-founder of the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review. He's been powering up on prickly pear margaritas for the past 20 minutes. And all right, let's go ahead and sample this one. All right, let's see here. Okay. I detect a citrus note, some breamed honey butter, just like they said. Do you notice any blackberry?
No, it's I took a little sip. It's spicy.
Spicy.
Great
Okay.
spice to it.
Chocolate. Some nice chocolate. Dr. Cannon, what are your thoughts?
The Old Spice.
Old Spice. Old Spice. Chad?
You're right. It's a little hot. Very smooth though. I'd say
Very
that.
sweet. Well, cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm. 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 Very smooth. No smoke, no peat. A rush of chocolate. Those citrus notes, maybe a lemon tang. A lemon tang. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. It's citrusy in its own way.
Okay.
But it is smooth. But the spice stands out to me the most.
Spice stands
I
out.
like that. I actually prefer that.
Let me, I'm gonna taste it again. I'm gonna look for the aftertaste at this point. Those blackberries are in the finish. They weren't, I had tasting notes, and so I was really curious about the blackberries. They're in the finish. They're in the finish. Very well balanced. Fantastic. I mean, again, William Wallace, isn't that the gentleman from Braveheart? Rob Roy, and then the Highlander. There can be only one. Queen, of course, provided the soundtrack to the Highlander movie. It's a classic, and when I drink this scotch, I'm thinking about the Scottish Highlands. And I'll just end with an anecdote to bring us full circle again to our father. When I'd always wanted to go to Ireland, and finally got to go with my wife, 3 children, my wife's parents, my father, my wife's best friend, her husband, their 2 kids, and one of their kids' friends from high school. Suffice it to say there was 14, 15 people. Oh, and my wife's parents' best friend, 16 people. I got to see nothing I wanted to see in Ireland. It was a disaster. So it was a 2-part trip. We flew from Ireland to Scotland, and I told my dad, I go, Pops, man, we got to break off. We got to break off from this group, otherwise we ain't going to see anything. And so me and my father went on the whiskey trail, and that's when I fell in love with Scotch. This was 2013 or 2013, and that's when I got interested in Scotch. So anyways, want to thank Dr. Tewari for joining me on the Rolling Thunder Scotch Review, episode 18. Again, we really want to have a giveaway when we hit 50,000 subscribers. We're on our way there. And again, thank you for supporting our channel. Cheers.